We're waiting for our guest to enter. Hello,
Can you see me right?
I can see you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, good. Let me get this screen in a bigger, full view of us. Let's see here. Gallery. Okay, we're good. Back to gallery. Welcome to the Eruption of Possible. We are here to introduce to you a narrative that is rare and that you may have never heard of or discussed. Our focus is on the successfully transition ex-offender, which is a hidden community in America. Because no matter how great their achievements are, once their past is revealed, they are usually judged by what they did and not who they have become. Now, I'm going to quickly throw some numbers at you. The Bureau of Justice estimates that more than 600,000 people are released from state and federal prisons in the United States each year. Additionally, about 9 million people are released from local and county jails annually. With more than 23 million ex-felons in America, only 2.2 million are incarcerated. According to a study by the RAND Corporation, 3.8% of small business owners have a criminal record. More than 1.7 million are employed by them. And within the group of business owners who have criminal histories, approximately 433,000 have a history of felonies. This is the narrative we want you to reflect on, the successfully transition ex-felon, because we know all you hear about is recidivism, and every 4 years during the voting cycle, you hear about ex-felons this and ex-felons that. So we want to introduce this narrative for you to reflect on. Today's guest is Mr. Wazir Mumin. I met Wazir when I was serving my 10 to 20 year sentence at Greatesford Prison in Pennsylvania. At the time, Wazir was serving a life sentence, and he ultimately served 52 years behind bars. I want to welcome you today, Wazir, and how are you?
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful, I'm fine.
All right, let's get started. Let's start with you giving us a quick history of your personal journey.
Beginning from prison?
No, beginning from how you got to prison and
Okay. Well, let me.
not necessarily crime, but your journey from teenager or whatever.
Well, let me say this first of all. It's a promise I made to myself
Mhm.
that I would never have audiences and fail to mention those I left behind.
Mhm.
And I wanted for the listeners, if you're Christian or Muslim, you've probably heard of the Prophet Yusuf. Peace and blessings be upon him. Peace of Allah be upon him, who innocently went to jail. Unlike the Prophet Yusuf, I wasn't innocent. But point I want to make is he met two figures in jail that he had intimate relationships with. One of them was leaving, and he asked the one that he told one of them, "You'll be leaving." And he asked the one who was leaving one thing: mention me to your Lord, meaning mention me to the authorities in society. Let them know my story. Let them know about me. And I said that as a lead into my mentioning, as Rockman said, I did 52 years, and there's no way I could leave prison and not mention those who left behind. To those of you with any authority in any way, shape, or form, I'm asking you to remember those that I left behind, good men and good women who are still in prison and who no longer deserve to be there. You know, and when I say with any authority, sometimes your authority can just be a phone call asking when long timers are going to be given more consideration. Authority comes in different forms and different shapes, but I have to always remember I went in prison at 20 years old. I led a life that was basically typical American black neighborhood life, hanging out, drinking. Drugs wasn't a big thing back then. Drinking wine and smoking reefer, that was our life, and gang warring or whatever. So it was a typical life that led me to my 52 years in prison. And I was fortunate to come out, and I would like to see attention draw to those because after coming out after 52 years, one of the things that I think amazed me the most, I was surprised at people looking at me as if I was something unique when I knew there was nothing unique about doing 52 years in prison in the sense that I left a whole lot of people with 50 and 52 years still there. So I still wrestle to understand how any society could keep people in jail 50, 52 years and not have a real awareness that they even exist. So I was like astonished that people were astonished. And I have told more than one reporter, I can take you to prison and show you a whole lot of 50 years. So I don't think, I don't see myself as anything exceptional except that I was blessed to have a second opportunity, which doesn't translate to mean I was the most worthy of that second opportunity. It came, I took it, I'm glad I was in a position to receive it. But there are lots of other people still there. And as a leadway to I hopefully we'll get into it. There's a big difference between coming home from prison, a young man, coming home from prison, a middle aged person, perhaps with time to build, than coming home from prison, uh, an elderly person. I left at 72 years, and thanks for good friends like Rahman and basically the Islamic community and a host of other people in the Philadelphia Masjid, I was embraced in a way that allowed my transition to be more smooth than I could ever uh, have gone through it without that kind of support. So I just wanted to get that out, that there are people there like me that are still there. And sometimes the help for them is no more than a phone call away. Calling the right people, mention their names, and hopefully other programs will get into that aspect of things.
Wazir, I have to. My first question for you is kind of based on my experience, and it's what I call my defining moment that changed my life. And what happened was, as you know, when you go to Greatest there's these two big doors you got to go through. And I was on the bus with, I guess, 7, 8 other inmates, right? And when those doors shut, it was this big slam, bam, loud noise, almost like a bomb went off. And I say that was my defining moment because at that very point, jail became a reality. It was like, it wasn't a situation where I was afraid or whatever. It's just that when you're out in the streets and doing what you do, jail is not really a reality. You know what I mean? Unless you've been there before and then you're recidivist or something like that. So, did you have an experience where change? There was a defining moment when you decided that your life was going to take a change for the better.
It's really hard to pinpoint because, as you know, when you first go to the first, you're surviving, you're feeling your way around,
Mm.
you're building friendships and establishing relationships and trying to stay away from relationships. It's a whole pot of tea. But if I really, it's going to seem like a big leap, and that's why I'm so hesitant to say it. Although it's the one that stands out in my mind. I mean, I went into prison in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a young man, you go through the prison routine, you know. I mean, you striving to survive, you placed in situations where you might not want to be, little fights here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to find yourself, you know, and you're trying to read. But I really think if I were to say I had a defining year, would have had to been in the maybe 1975 or 1976 when I started coming into what I consider a maturity, and I'm going to credit that to a person, another inmate, not prison authorities, another inmate.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the person many people now know as Imam Shamsuddin Ali.
Mm-hmm.
He was known as Captain Clarence back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came, before him, the Nation of Islam existed in prison. Most of us that were in the Nation of Islam were never in the Nation of Islam outside. We
Right.
accepted Islam in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And then came 71 or 72. For whatever reason, a lot of Muslims were locked up from the masjids outside
Mm-hmm.
and brought to prison.
One,
And it was our first
yeah, I'm one.
contact, yeah, Rahman being one of them. And our first contact with Islam as it was actually being taught and lived in the masjids, Nation of Islam style,
Mm-hmm.
came during that period. So I met a discipline I had never known before. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Because the nation was built on discipline.
Right.
It was built on accomplishing things.
Mm-hmm.
It much like the military, you were just told to do something, and that was your
Right.
job, that was your mission. You
Mm-hmm.
got it. You got it done, and that was very formative years that took that I started feeling structure.
Mm-hmm.
But then around 1975, I think it was, Imam Shamsuddin Ali, or Captain Clarence, as we knew, came. And I really credit him with putting me on a path that made mental work more than physical
Right.
physical work,
Right.
because prison
Right.
is a lot of things are based on physical.
Right. Right.
And I
Same thing in
witnessed
the
an
streets.
authority. Yeah,
Same thing in
I
the
wit-
streets. Yeah.
same right, and I witnessed an authority and uh, uh, that didn't. It wasn't black authority over black people.
Mm-hmm.
I witnessed a sense of authority where it didn't make no difference. You could be white, Indian, Chinese, or what. But when you met with Captain Clarence or
Mm-hmm.
Imam Shamsuddin, there was a sense of authority
Mm-hmm.
and structure and no compromising that opened the doors, and to witness that and to be taught that that was more value than carrying a knife. That was more value than being in here wasting your time selling drugs, doing this. Really start to put you on the mind. Actually made you feel like a fool anytime you got in the fight.
So he
You
helped.
could,
Oh, he helped open up your intellect.
that's just what he did. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, when you walk through Greater Ford, or Greater Ford doesn't exist no more, but they had all these pictures on the wall, former wardens, you know,
Mm-hmm.
former officials of different statuses. And I always used to say, Imam Shamsuddin or Captain Clarence picture should be on there, because he disarmed Greater Ford in a way
Mm-hmm.
nobody had done. And
Mm-hmm.
I take that, I really give him a lot of credit for making me start looking for, not just me, just a whole. We were young. We were, we in our
Right.
20s, 22. He just took a bunch of young guys and just gave us structure and discipline and a sense of finding the aim. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Right.
And that just, but that finding the aim and getting things done, that was just the nation. That was the way the nation was. Here's what we need, get it done. That's your squads. Mm-hmm.
And what's important about what you're saying was, you always hear me refer to my book. I wrote two books, and you always hear me refer to them. But one of the things I discussed in my book and is that America gives us a sense of our material worth.
Yeah.
It makes our material worth so much more important than our human worth that we never even reflect on our human worth. It seems like basically that was the transition you went from a physical creature to an intellectual creature.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think when you talk about prison reform, juvenile delinquency, those are the steps that you have to transition people from that physical material worth being the most important thing into your self-worth, and transfer them to them making their human worth is important. And when I was listening to you talk, it's the same transition I made. Matter of fact, I was passing Shamsuddin. I was coming when he was leaving, you know what I mean? However, but Imam Muhammad came into our lives and whatever. And that was kind of the same process where, and you know what, Wazir, it's not just prison. I hear guys that were in the service say to me that if it wasn't for the service, they would have never became a man. And the service did the same thing for them as far as that discipline and seeing themselves as something more than their material worth. So that's a point that I think is important for us as successfully transition ex-felons to understand. And I talk about that as a common denominator, because basically what you're saying is something I went through. And it's something somebody else went through. You're not going to have a successfully transitioned ex-offender. And when I say that, I mean non-returner. We always talk about recidivism, but nobody talks about non-returners. You know, and you until you can get a person through that process, they're going to be a recidivist rather than a non-returner.
Right.
You know what I mean? What I like to do, I feel strange about this, but I talk to myself a lot, right? So I hear, you ever hear these questions about what would you tell your young self? And every time I hear something like that come up, I come up with only one thing. If I was talking to my young self, the only thing I could say is, boy, what the hell is wrong with you? You know what I mean? So is there something you could tell your young self now that maybe could have avoided all the crises you went through over those 52 years, or prevented those 52 years?
Nothing unique in the sense that I think all of us had parents or parent-like figures in our lives that gave us all the right clues, gave us all the right. So the worst thing, we didn't take them serious enough.
Exactly.
You know, and we reached that stage where we thought we knew more than them.
Right.
We thought we had been through things, that our life was so different. We were experiencing something that they hadn't. We just don't see our parents as having been in the game. I mean, a whole life game.
Right.
You know, mom sneaking out to meet the boyfriend. You know, about being, we don't know our parents are speaking from experience.
Right.
I never seen my mother smoke. I never heard her curse. I never heard her drink. So I was surprised when I really started finding out, hey, mom had a real life, you know. You know, and mom, so there was nothing really new under the sun, but we don't value those little lessons that advices we get, you know.
And on that point, when I say to myself when I said to you just now that I would have told my young self, boy, what's wrong with you? Those aren't my words. Those are the words of my grandmother that she used to say to me. Boy, what's wrong with you? You know, you follow what I'm saying? So I understand what you're saying. That you know, for some odd reason, you know, we had hearing, but we didn't have listening.
Right.
So, and I think that's something that we need to transition, because what I do is, whenever I talk to young people,
Yeah.
I imagine I'm talking to the young me,
Okay.
trying to redirect the
Right.
lifestyle that I ended up living. You know what I
And
mean?
see, with me, when I came home, I had a feeling of perception, and I don't know if it was understood.
Mm-hmm.
People would say, and I'm talking about young now, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that any of us that really want to help them, we there has to be a balance.
Right.
So I was asked sometimes, would I talk to youth?
Right.
And one time I was asked, would I be willing to go into the youth study center?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, I would be willing to go. But I had a condition. One thing struck me when I came home and I started being around youth
Mm-hmm.
that I understood was they knew more. I said, how am I coming out at 52 years? How can I talk to them about street? They know more street than I know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know street like they know
Mm-hmm.
it. You know? So my feeling, my gut instinct was I needed to get close to them so they could put me down as life as it is, not as I want it to be for them, which I wanted to be good, or as it was, but I needed to understand the life that they live, which
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea about just coming home. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the condition that I always felt strong about, if I ever went to talk to youth, especially in a juvenile detention center,
Mm-hmm.
was that I only wanted to talk to the ones we were pretty sure were going to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Not going home,
Mm-hmm.
going to prison. Because I understood that just like they knew more about street than I knew more about prison
Mm-hmm.
than they did. So my goal was to say, look, you're gone. We know you got the sentence. You're gone. You hopefully you'll get out, you know. But I want to talk to you about the things that will facilitate the process of your release, the things to do and things not to do. Establish yourself from the beginning, get an idea of a program where you want, stick to it. Make this your mission. You know, one brother Abdul Pashi always say he had one goal in the prison, that was getting out. You know, everything was to facilitate
Right.
that.
Coming
And,
home.
and so, and I'm saying that's the bounce. We talking about recidivism and why they don't, but I think we just have to approach it where we are, what we have to have, and be willing to understand where these young people are, their life. You know, if sometimes you can talk to a person and you're really talking about your life,
Mm-hmm.
you're not talking about their life.
Mm-hmm.
I did 41 years before they made me go to an alcohol drug program.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't smoked in 41 years or
Right.
drank anything,
Right.
but it was a condition I had to go through the program to
Mm-hmm.
get institutional support. And it was really my first realization of where the young people were. I'm sitting in the drug program. I'm watching these kids break down and cut up and bag stuff up. I ain't never heard the name of.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew instinctively I can't reach them on, you know,
On that level.
on that level.
Yeah. Right.
They putting me down. I use the term state store. I didn't even realize most of the kids didn't even know what a state store
They
was.
still
They
was.
call it what spirit store or something.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and they laugh. They got a kick out of that. You know, so you know we have to start on a realistic view that we don't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And what will that do to the youth? It won't make them feel like a student only. It'll also up them understand that you're a teacher too.
Right. Right.
And it will foster their self-worth, you
Right.
know. And I think that too many times we talk down as if there's nothing for them to contribute when hey, they live in it. You know, we think we know it, and we have to have that balance. I think.
You know, on that point, probably one of the most troubling things for me as an ex-felon, when I first came home, I got a job with an organization called Crisis Intervention. I think you remember that. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I did, and I think you remember the self-government workshop that me and Talabine hooked up while we was in prison.
Right.
Well, one of the things I did is I volunteered through Crisis to talk to once a week to go to the youth study center to talk to the youth who were certified adults, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And like you said, Earl, and this brought it to my mind, like you were just talking about on that level. I don't know anything that made me more troubled than to be sitting around talking to a 12, 13, 14-year old, 15 was the oldest, knowing that these kids were getting ready to be sentenced to life in prison.
Right.
And it was really troubling, man. And I know one of the guys I'm gonna try to have on this show. He was I know you remember when all those juvenile lifers got released.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they were sending kids to jail for life. That I mean, God, I mean, it was very troubling. Man, I worked with them, and we got through to some or whatever. But the problem was, you know, all I could do was help them navigate prison. I
Right.
couldn't help them navigate the outside world because they were not going to see the outside world
Right.
anytime soon. You know what I
Right.
mean? Some of those juvenile lifers that just got out, or some of the kids I work with, those guys are in their 40s and close to 50 now.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean?
And see,
So,
and that's the part where I'm coming from. I mean, people say you got a lot of prison experience, but they don't put the emphasis on prison. No,
right,
I have a lot of prison experience,
right.
not street experience.
Yeah,
So
but
we
you
have
know
to
what?
find a way to
That's important.
facilitate.
But that's important though, because
Mhm.
if you know how to navigate prison
There you
without
go.
getting deeper and deeper in trouble, you
Right.
know how to navigate life.
Right.
Because life in prison is a lot more difficult to navigate than life outside. So,
Right.
so if you can transfer that information to someone, and hey, listen, you're talking about my relationship with you. One of the things I want to touch on before we leave is mentorship. And I know you sent me something some time ago where you were uh, uh, um, uh, uh, what's the word I'm trying to think of when
Uh,
the organization
like honored or
you were honored in New York or something
in
about
Alabama.
in Alabama, right? And it was basically how. Correct me if I'm wrong. How you mentored people when you were in prison? Is that what that was all
Right.
about?
Right.
And so that whole concept of mentorship. It can be it doesn't have to be in one set environment,
Right.
and I give you a lot of credit for and we always had this conversation. I remember one time you was giving a cook bar, and you said you mentioned the guy Simon and all the guys that was down 20 something had been down because you were down like 20 something years before I got there, right?
Right.
But you said, listen, these guys been locked up for all these years. We got to talk. We got to look at these young brothers, and I'm paraphrasing you. You know what I mean? But what it did was indirectly, I would say, but I mean directly, but I would say more indirectly. It gave me confidence in my own abilities, and it helped steer me in a way in which, you know what, as I told you this morning or the other day, the one thing I got from all that was I didn't know what I was going to do when I went home, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. You know
Right.
what I mean? And everything I've done since I've been home, right, started on that initial principle of what I was not going to do. You know,
Right. Right. Well, I think part of mentorship, mentorship, it really has to do with we're meeting the person where they're at
right?
and encouraging them
Mm-hmm.
to not give up on what they have chosen as their self-interest.
Right.
as opposed to being forced to go to a drug program, being forced to go to this program. Most of the time, you have to do that if you want to make parole.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't always translate. It very seldom translates into a person's real interest. When he
Right.
leaves that program, if he is latched on to something,
Mm-hmm.
if he found out, damn, I can draw. If he found out he got a good mind for math,
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing you can do is encourage them to pursue that. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And no artificially created self program that's supposed to be stimulating
Mm-hmm.
will work over, will be more superior to what a person's really find is his genuine interest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can help them develop that, I think that goes a long ways. And sometimes they can only come out because prison doesn't offer everything. But
Mm-hmm.
if they really know they've touched on to their inner core, what they really want to do,
Mm-hmm.
then they come out and they have a sense of direction.
Mm-hmm.
Their direction, their steps will take them to what's going to facilitate that burning desire to be whatever they
Mm-hmm.
want to be, you know. And sometimes I'm not even going to say sometimes. I think most of the time a prisoner know more about a prisoner's self-worth and self-value and self-interest and motivational
Mm-hmm.
mindset than staff does, simply because we spend more time together. Now, genuine staff, and there's many genuine staff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if they see that, then some of them
Mm-hmm.
will facilitate that too. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying, what stops recidivism, to me, what will stop it will be tapping into that more than defined programs, because they're just part of the prison project. This is what we set out as reformative
Mm-hmm.
programs. You know, we need these programs, and you suffer for them. I mean, God, I'm sitting in the class. I mean, I'm drug and alcohol class. I don't even, when they got past reef Ryan and heroin, I didn't know what them kids was talking about. You
Right.
know,
Right.
so
Well,
so
you
it
haven't
was
been down so
there
long.
for me.
Yeah.
And and it don't have to be that. It can be anything. A guy wanted to be a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
You making him be defined because he cut more grass in the yard faster than anybody else. You know,
Right. Right.
tap into his carpentry skills. You know,
Right.
and you have to find a person where they at and facilitate that aspect.
And you just mentioned recidivism, right? And we hear a lot about these recidivism rates and stuff like this. And something I wanted to bring up is that, and I was asked this on an interview about recidivism, right? Now, you and I both know this. So when a guy goes home, matter of fact, I talked to you this morning about sometimes where I used to sit back and know who was coming back and who wasn't coming back, just
Right.
based on their behavior in prison. But if a guy goes home and he comes back 3 times, well, they call him a 3-time loser or whatever, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But statistically, he's listed in the recidivism rates like it's 3 different people.
Like it's 3 different people, right?
But it's the same guy coming back. So if you have 10 guys who came back 3 times, right? Statistically, it looks like 30 different people came back when it's only 3 people coming back. I mean, 10 people coming back 3 times. So even when we hear people talk about the recidivism rate, right? It's bloated because it's not real. I don't know if it's not the right word, bloated, but it's not accurate because it looks like a whole bunch of people are coming back.
Right.
Same people.
Look like you're
coming,
talking about 3 failures or three
right,
people who didn't make it rather than one person
in one, right?
didn't make it
And
3 times. Right?
and there's no statistical measurement about the percentage of non-returners. And that's why I brought those stats up earlier about how many people are released from prison every year, yet it's only 2.2 million people incarcerated. So these ex-felons have to be doing something right. They to be staying, your next door neighbor, no matter who they are. I had people when I was in New York at the City College, when they you know, when they found out about when I got outed, so to speak, people would say to me, "I would have never guessed you were in prison." You now I say that about myself. How many other people are in our society that were in prison and their neighbors, their friends, or whatever would have never known that they were? How many people would meet you after having a conversation with you and not know you had spent 52 years in jail? Would even believe you spent 52 years in jail.
Well,
So,
I've been blessed to been with several groups and seen people from all across the country who are bankers, who are in charge of departments at Columbia University
mm-hmm,
that have been 20, 25 years
mm-hmm,
confined,
mm-hmm,
and to sit there and to hear them tell their story and see where they are,
mm-hmm.
it's really a crime to not have these figures broadcast across the television screens, on radio programs, known more than the people we know who are, oh, we can tell you how many times he's been back.
Right,
Yeah, but you can't tell me how many times she hasn't been back,
right.
or where she, or what she's achieved since she's been out. Where she's at. I mean, I've been bankers, every field you could think of, and we're there. And I
And
know
what?
it's your
And,
desire and it's my desire. Our failure is not being able to bring them together in a way that the
and
public
that
will
and
know
that's
them
what
as
this
we know them.
and that's what this platform is.
Right.
We want to bring all of them together
Right.
on the show. And something
Yeah.
that I mentioned to you, we got less than 3 minutes, but something I mentioned to you this morning that an analogy that I drew up in my book is that you never hear a butterfly referred to as a former caterpillar.
Right.
Because what has happened is that caterpillar state is gone. And
Right.
we are the same way. Those of us who have successfully transitioned, you keep talking about us as ex-felons, but in fact, I tell people I'm not an ex-felon. I'm a divorcee from the criminal justice system.
Right.
So, but anyway, I want to thank you for joining me today. This is our first session of the eruption of possible, and hopefully we can have you back, and hopefully we can get a lot of people.
Inshallah. Okay.
And we're gonna try to put this on our YouTube channel and send it out. So when I give you the okay that it's on the channel, I want you to contact your people and let them tune in, and then hopefully we can get together and get some of those guests you talking about that are bankers and this, that, and other thing.
Right.
So the public can see who
See,
in
right.
their
Real
community.
faces. Right.
I mean, and I'm talking about pillars of our community
Right.
who have
Right.
had this situation. You follow
Right.
what I'm saying? So again, thank you, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of these.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Be safe. All right.
We turn this on.